Hey guys, how's it going? My name's Chad and I'm part of the Shimano's pro staff, and I specialise in the land-based side of things. In particular, I've definitely got a excelled passion for land-based fishing. To tell you guys a little bit about myself, I've been fortunate enough to fish all over the country, South Island, Stewart Island, North Island. And probably the one thing that I really love about New Zealand is we're so privileged. We can literally go fishing anywhere. Whether we're in Wellington in a city or we're in Auckland, there's always somewhere that we can go, and you'll be amazed what's right under our noses a lot of the time. It's just having a little bit of an idea, and in particular, doing a little bit of planning and working on some preparation. Over the years, fishing around the place, I've fished plenty of different competitions and on the local scene, and I've been privileged enough to win a few of those and win a few national titles and things like that. But the biggest attribute I think that's built to that success has been the way that I make a plan, I do a little bit of homework, and I work to it. But it all starts with the fundamentals. It starts with the absolute basics of how I put the rod together and then breaking down a beach. So we'll go right through that whole process. We'll cover off all the bare basics, and then at the end or during the time, if you guys have got any questions at all or you're not sure on something, please ask me. I'm more than happy to break it down and show you everything that I've got here at the end. So the first thing is, when we sorry guys, when we go surf casting, obviously we need some really good line. The main line that I tend to use is nylon, and the reason I use nylon over braid is because with surf casting, stretch is your friend. When you've got a sinker that's 100 metres out or 150 metres out, you've got a bit of swell, some wind, some current, it tends to pull the line. There is some advantages when you are using braid from the shoreline, which is distance. It gives you a higher strength to diameter, whereas mono you've got to use really light line, so you've got that risk of trying to achieve better distances, but it's a bit like trout fishing, you're using a lighter line. So for me, I use this Shimano stuff right here, which is 6.8 kilo, and I use that right over the country. The good thing with this line is it's 0.28 of a millimetre, so it's really thin for its line class. It's pretty good strength, being just under 7 kilos, which is roughly around about that 15 pound. But the hard part is that when you put this on the line, if you were to cast it out normally, it'll just break. So you need to have a shock leader. And it's really important to put a shock leader on it. But when you're spooling up your line with the Shimano reels, the awesome thing with these is that the spools come with these cleats. And I'll quickly show you what these cleats do, because not a lot of people know. So these cleats here clamp around the spool, and they enable you to use the perfect amount of line without any backing. Because if you were to load that up with 6.8 kilo, you'd just about get 1,000 metres on there. And reality is, you're probably only going to use about 300 metres at the very most. So by using these cleats, they just pop onto the reel, front and back, and then when you spool it up, you're using the perfect amount, 300. So for me, I use the 6,000s, and that enables me to put 300 metres perfectly every single time of 6.8 kilo on the reel. The next part, once we've spooled that reel, we've got our 300 metres of 6.8 kilo on there. The next part is putting on a shock leader, and quite often I see guys buy a brand new rod, proud as punch, they go down the beach, first cast they have a nightmare and they break off, and they've got no idea how to get it working again. You've got a few disappointed kids when that happens. So I use these tapered shock leaders. These Shimano shock leaders, which I'll show you later on, they come in packs of 10, they're tapered, and the advantage with using tapered shock leaders over just normal straight, say 30 pound or 40 pound, is you're minimizing the size of the knot And that's really important because when you cast the rod, that sinker is leaving at over 100 k's an hour, and it's whipping your knot through those guides at a great velocity. By making it as small as possible, it'll last for, for several days or a whole trip if you like. I'm pretty fussy. I like to retie it every morning, but I'll show you how to tie it. Because they come in 15 meters, ideally a Shockleader probably doesn't want to be any longer than about 9 meters. If every Shockleader has different weights, I know that my mainline here is 0.28, and I know that this thin end here is 0.23. So ideally I need to make sure that the bottom end that I use is heavier than 0.28. Do you understand that? So I take off about 3 meters. And by doing that, I've now, where it's starting to taper, and the Shockleader's now heavier than where my mainline starts. The knot I use is just a really, really very basic knot. It's called a back-to-back uni. And with my mainline, I do a little loop, I wrap it through 3 times, and I pull it tight, but not, it's not super tight, it can still slide. And then with my leader, I generally wrap that 3 times as well. You can do it 4 if you like, but I definitely wouldn't do it any more than that. And then just bring it to, very softly so you don't melt the line. Put a little bit of moisture on it. And then when you pull it to, it creates the perfect small knot. I'll just give that a quick little, and then you just cut the tag ends off. When you cut the tag ends off, leave the tag ends about 1 millimeter, maybe 1.5, and that just allows for a little bit of elasticity to take up on it. But that's really, really strong. It's a tiny little knot. And then we start to wind on our leader. Once we've wound on our leader, we'll just get some of this off, guys. Nice and simple. There we go. So now it's back on the reel there. We pull it off until we hit the silver end. That tells us we're at the end. There we go. Easy peasy. And then again, because we don't want to have a leader longer than it needs to be because you've got extra weight that you're casting out, and the whole point of using a tapered leader is to try and maximize the ability to cast further. So we take a couple of meters off that bottom side, and that leaves us with roughly around about a 9 to 10 meter leader. So that's our reel all set up, ready to go, and we know that if we go fishing, we're not going to have any problems whatsoever. The basics are done right, really nice and strong, new. We can trust our knots there, and all I've used on that leader is a real simple back-to-back uni knot, which is 3/4. And the rig that we're going to be using, guys, is called a Imp long cast rig, which I'll show you guys in close later on. The advantages with using this rig I'll go through. The main one is it's really easy to tie. It takes about 2 or 3 minutes to tie. When I'm tying the backbone on, I'm just doing a uni knot. If you haven't guessed already, I use a uni knot for pretty much everything. It's nice and strong and it's just simple. I do 5 turns with the uni knot. And our sinker here, which is just a standard sand grip sinker, 5 ounce. Now there's 2 different types of sand grip sinkers, and the ones that have got a green tag on them mean that it's heavy duty, so it's going to withstand west coast conditions. The ones without the green tag means that it's a lighter gauge, and you'll get away with fishing them on the east coast where there's not quite the current. And really, really simply, they just clip on. So when you start your fishing, it takes 2 seconds, it's nice and easy, you can clip it on, away you go, and when you're finished, you clip it off. It's that simple. Now the purpose of this rig and why it's called a long cast rig is that it brings in line the baits that you're tying and sends it all out in a real narrow profile that's aerodynamic, and it generally gives you about 20% more on your casts. So the baits just clip on to this genie clip, just like that, and then it's on. And when you're finished, or you want to swap off your trace, you can clip it on and off really, really quick. The good part about that is when you quite often get a bite or the fish are on, it enables you to get that fish off and get the next one out really quick, so you're maximising those short bite times. So something that I tend to do is I'll have half a dozen traces baited, all ready to go, sitting on top of the chili bin. I know that a bite's going to happen. I'll get that fish in, I'll clip it off, and then I grab the next trace, I clip it on, and I'm back out there really, really quick and maximising my time. Now what makes this rig special, if you haven't worked it out already, is that when you do your bait, it clips onto the sinker like so. And then when it hits the water, it's got a little paddle on the bottom of it. And it's the most basic type of long cast clip that you can get. And that paddle releases the trace like this. So it comes free and away from the line. And then you've got like a trapeze. It looks more sophisticated than it is. But it enables the fish to grab that bait and without any weight on it whatsoever and take it properly. The long cast rig that I make, I use fluorocarbon because it gets a little bit less reflection and it's more rigid. So you're not getting any of those tangles, it's not pigtailing, it's doing exactly what it should do, and it stays straight most of the time. Even if it's a little bit slack, it's not wrapping on itself, and that's the advantage with using fluorocarbon. The traces, on the other hand, when I make them, and I'll go through those, I'm only using 40 pound at the very heaviest, because everything that I want to catch doesn't have teeth that are gonna bite through that. I don't want sharks and stuff like that, or bycatch. So if that happens, it's not the end of the world. But generally, your snapper, they're never going to bite through that. And just like other formats of fishing, lure fishing, trout fishing, you want to be using the lightest amount of line possible. What governs that is that if you're using line that's too light, it'll wrap, it'll twist, and it'll create a bit of a problem for you. So somewhere in between 20 and 40 pound line, is the ideal weight for your trace. The lighter you go, the more likely you are to get tangles, the more likely you are to get a bite. The heavier you go, you're more likely to land the fish, but for line-shy fish, especially like trevally and some of the other pelagics, they're less likely to take it. So go as light as you possibly can. Now, when you're doing your rigs up, there's a couple of different ways that I like to do it myself. I always fish with a little bit of bling. You've gone all the way down there and you're spending that time. You want to give yourself the best chance. You've heard the guys before me, they were talking about fishing with lures. They were using bakus and all sorts of stuff, and they've got different types of skirts on them. They've got metallic colours, dark colours. And what that's doing is that any type of movement in the water with a little bit of colour, it's giving it that, that extra 5%. So I try and imitate some of the things that lure fishermen do. That's where these things come into play. Any type of swell or surge is going to give that some movement. If there's quite a bit of movement and I want to keep my bait on the deck and not have it floating up too high because the pelagic fish like kahawai are grabbing the baits, then I'll use skirts to keep it down, but still give it a little bit of extra zap. The other things that these things do is they're luminescent, so at night time my bait's glowing, it gives it an extra little bit of pinch, helps the fish find the trace. So there's a few different ways to get the bite. On really bright days, I'm using really bright floats. On dull days, just like trout fishing, I'm using those darker colours that are more silhouette. On the hooks that I'm using, is I'm a real firm believer that big fish you can catch them on big hooks, that's for sure, but little hooks catch everything. And nowadays, when you're using light line like this stuff here, you're only really running probably 1.8 kilos of drag at the end of the day. It feels like a lot, but it's not. So you're not putting enough weight on to break these hooks. And they've got the super strong, but the thing about using the smaller hooks is they're a finer gauge. So finer gauge gives you much better penetration, especially when the fish are finicky on the bite and biting a little bit slow, but you'll be amazed what that little fella there can hook and hold on to. Like, I've caught plenty of snapper over 10 kilo on that little fella. It really, really is incredible. The advantage with using smaller hooks is it enables you to also get away with using smaller baits. The smaller your bait, the further that you can get it. I love using big baits, but unfortunately when I'm in a setting of fishing a really big swell or a big sea, no matter how far I think I can swim my bait out or get it out there, I just can't beat getting a little piece of octopus a long way. Yeah, these little hooks here on the trace is a fixed 3-bar beak hook, and the one that's sliding behind it is a little 3-bar circle hook. And the little red stuff on here, that's silicon tubing, and that stops it from sliding. So when I bait up and go to cast, it's not flying back at 100 miles an hour and doing the helicopter. And that's the product there. Really good stuff. Yeah, so you can pull it away, get it out of the way, bait up, and then when you're finished, you can just grab that silicon tubing, bring it down, and it won't come up at all. It'll stay right there and fish really, really well. There's a few different baits that I'll use around the country surf casting. Number one for me is probably Octopus because it's specific to what I'm targeting. I use quite a bit of crayfish as well. There'll be a few people that cringe at the use of crayfish, but pretty handy in the water doing a fair bit of diving, so it gives me the privilege to be able to eat a few and use a few for bait here and there. To maximise it and make it go a long way, I use it with Octopus. I use them together. Crayfish by itself targets fish that you won't normally catch on bait, like blue moki, for example, smoothhound sharks, crustacean eaters. By using it with Octopus, not only do you get to maximise the use of it, you're limiting your bycatch. So a kahawai is not going to come along and grab your nice piece of crayfish. A lemonfish isn't going to come along and grab your piece of crayfish because the octopus that you've got on it will prevent them from taking it a lot of the time. Other baits that I really, really like to use is fresh grey mullet over pilchards. I always think fresh is best, and because I go diving for my bait, I also like to go out and catch my own grey mullet. And it's just fantastic. Big fish love it. It's a big fish bait. And I'll come back to a little bit of baiting as I break down the beach. Regardless of where I go fishing in the country, it doesn't really matter. I treat every single beach the same. I have a quick look over Google Maps, which is a really impressive tool to use. And I'm looking for structure. I'm looking for headlands that might have reef, which might have mussel rocks. I'm looking for fresh creeks, freshwater creeks or rivers. Rivers have bait fish, and then I'm looking at which is the dominant side that water comes out. Is it north or south? Because that creates a natural eddy, which has a natural food environment. And again, that's will depend as well on where the kahawai and kingfish are sitting, or the trevally. They love those shallow flats on the leeward side, so keeping an eye out for that. The most important thing is being able to break that beach down and understand what food sources where and what you're trying to target, because it's specific to exactly where you want to be. Now, the photo behind me gives you an indication of how I break down the beach. From the beach, when you jump on it, whether it's 90 Mile, whether it's just out the back here, Mangawai, or Marata, Bay of Plenty, it doesn't matter. If you're at the height of the water, all you can see is whitewash. It's very hard to distinguish anything, so you've got to get some height. You've got to go to the back of the dunes, climb up, have a good look at it. And it's just like boat fishing. You never rush in and just park up and think you're going to slay it. Take your time. Look at it. It doesn't matter if you're sitting there for an hour. Just keep looking at it until you're confident. Really, really important. So once you've found the bait fish and you've got a likely stretch of water, or you've got your tuatuas that you're after, this is the sort of stuff that you're looking at. That red area up here, you've got an inner channel that goes along the beach, and for the most part, north of it, on that inner channel, it's not deep enough to provide the snapper that you're after. And then where it blows out, where I've got that red line through the rip, that's a natural area where all the food right and close as the tides come up and lick that fresh sand, you've got dead crabs, you've got all that goodness, are all getting swept through that red area and then pushed down towards that yellow line. The yellow line is deep water, it's clean water, there's nothing behind it breaking whatsoever, so you've got no barriers, and the fish are right in behind that wave, right in the back of that turbulence, feeding really, really well. So there's two different ways to fish this area if I was looking at it. And one is putting on a wetsuit, going out to my neck, wading through this stuff here, right up to these white walls, and then casting over it and walking 120 metres back to my stand, and that's pretty taxing. But the rewards are big snapper as the tide's pushing in, nice big octopus bait. It's really good, but it also comes with risks. But how you identify that is you've got all this white stuff through here. Where it's white, it means it's shallow. It means there's a sandbar there. And the speed of it and how fluffy it is indicates the amount of surge and current. So as we come back along these blue lines through this part here, you can see there that there's no whitewash. There hasn't been whitewash through here. You can see that there's a piece in here where the wave reforms and resets, which is back over here. So you know that's actually quite deep water. But where you've got this constant flow up where these blue lines are, it's where it's just paddling through quite calmly, it's telling you that it's safe to walk through at that phase of the tide. If it's an outgoing phase, you know that you can stay on it, it's fine. If it's incoming, you've got to check the depth and be really, really sure of it. Now, back to that red area. That red area is really good fishing, particularly when it comes to high tide. That's what you're looking for. On any surf beach, you're looking for that red area. You don't have to get wet, you don't have to be half mad, you don't have to wear a wetsuit and swim or any of that sort of stuff. You can keep your feet dry, and you just need to hit that front lip, which is about in line with my hand, just in front of that red line. And the fish are coming right in there and they're feeding up hard. They're eating the tuatuas, they're using that access point to get right in on the shellfish, the crabs, whatever fish have been destroyed through the tidal change. It's a really good place to be. The time of the day also has a big influence on what you're fishing and what you're looking for. The difference between daytime fishing and nighttime fishing: daytime fishing, you're looking for depth, especially if it's clean water, you're looking for depth. That's the golden thing. If it's dirty, cloudy, or night, that principle changes, because snapper, they drop their sense of sensitivity as such, and they're out feeding, particularly in that dirty water. If it's green, bit of swell, cloudy, They completely drop their senses, and you'll find them in this sort of stuff here. Even nighttime fishing, right in here, right in close. But daytime fishing, that changes, especially when it's clean. There are target, there's sharks, there's all that sort of stuff, and you just won't find them there. Surfcasting is really interesting, and the more you break it down, the more you think about it, it kind of becomes like a science. You look at an area like this, and you think, where am I going to cast and what am I going to catch? And you've got all sorts of different species. You've got all your bait fish that congregate over this. They think they're safe there. They get pushed off that yellow line and they sit in here because they're a hot target for kingfish. So your likes of your kingfish are just sitting in here, and in between sets, they're whistling over this and then coming back into this little safe, chilled water. All of your pelagics, your kahawai, your trevally, and your kingfish love that water. This sort of stuff right in close, that's not quite deep enough for snapper. Other fish you can expect to catch, lemonfish, right over this bar. And they're not bad eating. They're right where all the crabs are, right on top of the bar where all the shellfish are. And then as we go back out, obviously you're hitting that deeper water, and that's where we're going back towards the snapper. Other variances that change to this is if you've got a rock that's right in close that holds mussels, the tide might change and give you different access points throughout that phase that enables you to get closer or further away. There's a few other things that change as well. Like when you're fishing in wintertime compared with summer, there's big differences in feeding patterns and the habits. Through spring and summer, you're fishing with lots of fish. There's a lot of smaller fish. They're schooling up. They're competing for food. So every bait that you throw out, quite often you're going to have pickers that are nibbling your bait. The objective when it's like that is using durable, hardy baits like your Octopus, so that way those pickers don't take it off, and it gives the maturer fish an opportunity to have a good crack at it. Whereas in wintertime, there's not that number of fish. They're not fighting each other to get a feed. They're just cruising along. They're doing their thing. It's either before spawning and they're heading into the harbours, or it's after spawning and they're coming right in to get a feed. So it changes things a lot. You can use smaller baits. You can use, the likes of anchovies to get a bite, particularly through Bay of Plenty. That works an absolute treat. So yeah, there's a few different tactics between the times of the year. I'm going to wrap it up there, guys, because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather. But if you've got any questions whatsoever, please, by all means, welcome to ask me anything. What's that, sorry, sir? Is there any merit to using a Baitrunner type of reel over a standard type of reel? Yeah, there is, depending on the application and how you're fishing. Some people like to set a really light drag, so that way when the fish comes along and takes the bait, particularly when they're biting very subtly, you use a really light drag, and that Baitrunner, the second drag, enables you to do that. And then when you get to the rod and you're ready to strike, you've had it preset for a couple of kilos, 2.2 kilos, and you're straight into it. The other advantage that I like with a Baitrunner over a standard reel is when you're slide baiting. I love slide baiting. It's a fun way to fish. It's casting out a sinker and then running a live bait down through a clip down your main line, and that's targeting kingfish, John Dory, pelagics, that sort of stuff. That secondary drag enables you to have a really light setting so it can take it without too much weight. And then when you're ready to crank the sinker back against the clip, it's really quick, so you're not having to muck around. The only thing that I would say with these, the Shimano reels now have got quick drags, so within that much of a turn, it goes from lock to slack. So they're really quick and efficient. And once you've used them for a period of time, you kind of know, right, 3 clicks I'm there, 4 I'm there, 5 I'm there, and it's just becomes second nature. It's really quick. Yeah, but good question. Yep. Don't be shy to ask me anything. You're most welcome.
I was told that if you lose your gear to a shark, that it will pack up and move as the shark will hang around.
Not true. No. So it's a good question, that one. When you're fishing and you're catching sharks, it gives you an indication that the water's slightly cooler, depending on the type of shark you're catching. Lemonfish, the one with the white spots, they're everywhere. They're, I think there's a photo of one just right there. Third one over, that's a lemonfish, the one they sell commonly in fish and chips. You'll catch them from the head to the toe of the country, all different types of conditions. Other fish like schoolfish, they tend to follow the cold water, and then when you've got other sharks like spiny dogs and stuff like that, they've got a few white dots and a barb on the top of them. They thrive in cold water. They tell you that that the temperature's gone too low and there's probably not going to be a snapper here. One thing that I do find though is that when you get the changing of the seasons around April, May, June, now, those sharks are usually followed very, very closely by a very big snapper. So if you're catching those sorts of sharks, there's a number of cases over the years where I've got them and I've busted off or whatever, that's a bloody shark. And then the next cast, it's like bang, there's a 12 kilo snapper. So, and that's really, really frequent. So if you do catch a shark, don't pack up and go home. Dig in and have another cast. Yeah. Guys, got any questions? What's my favourite area to fish? Everywhere in the country, I will literally pull up the map to see where it's good, whether it's Taranaki, Wellington, Hawke's Bay, Northland, and I will drive. I will go for it. I love the adventure. If I was to pick one area, it would probably be Taranaki, and that's because as a fishery it's sheltered from the weather. It's sheltered by the weather or protected by the weather a lot of the time, so it's not very often that you get a very big window, but when you do, it's special. The amount of big fish in Taranaki is special, and I've spent a number of years through Northland, from Cape Maria down Great Exhibition Bay, and that's fantastic too. But it gets a lot of commercial pressure. So those fish are not getting mature, they're not reaching that age now. But on the West Coast, they definitely do. Yep, they're not getting the commercial pressure, the big, big fish. And yeah, it's a special place to be for sure. Yeah, I do. So there's 3 main rigs that I'll use. This is my favourite because I like the idea of being able to cast far and not using it if I don't need to. So that's what makes that good. It gives me that ability. It's having a tool in the toolbox. The other rig that I will use, if I've got one here, yes I have, I've got one pre-made, is a running rig. And I'll show you guys what that looks like and how that works. And of course you've got your classic ledger rig as well. So this is a running rig. I'll just tie this on. Same deal, I use a uni knot when I tie it on. Usually not above my head like this. Have you used a running rig before? Okay, right. So the thing with the running rig is you don't quite have the ability to cast it as far, but it's really, really simple. You don't need the flash little imp clip, that costs money. It's just done with Billy basic stuff. So I've got a 60-pound trace line here. I've got about a 15 kilo barrel swivel. And then I've got 2 genie clips. They're made from Gemini. They're a breakaway product. You can buy plenty of them for relatively cheap. Now on that, between it, I've got 2 beads which just protect the knot. And the sinker, when I cast, it obviously sits where it sits there. Now it's the same principle with the trace, really quick to interchange between them. But the difference is that when I cast, it doesn't come off because it's already free. And that will lock into the sand, like so. And then I've got this trace here is now directly contacted with the line. So if we put it on the right angle and it's just sitting out over here, like so, there's no weight from the sinker on the fish. It can pass straight through. So when it's set like this, and I'm sorry because I can't keep the tension on, but when a fish pulls it, it's not pulling weight on the sinker, it's pulling weight directly on my rod. So it's really, really good when you're fishing places like Bay of Plenty, for example, where the fish can be really, really picky. Places like Auckland in the middle of the day, there's some places there where I'd use this rig over the other one, where distance isn't quite as important. But yeah, that's definitely a really good alternative to use. And you're most well going to have a close-up look at that. Yeah. Live baiting? Live baiting. So I didn't bring my trace for live baiting, but I'll tell you what it looks like. So when I'm live baiting, I'm not casting a bait, I'm casting a bare sinker. My sinker's tied directly to my leader, so ignore that, and I cast that out exactly where I want it. There's an art to live baiting, and it's about using the current, pinpointing exactly where the fish is. So for example, I talked about freshwater, the river mouth, or you've got around harbours where you've got big banks where the current pushes against. So I'll pinpoint exactly where I want my live bait to go. I'll cast straight at it, and generally I'll put the rod so that way the current will take my live bait. So once I set that's set, my rod's out, sinker's on, I'll make a trace that's probably between 1 to 3 meters long. It'll be roughly around about 50-pound fluorocarbon, not any heavier than that. And I use the right size hook for the live bait that I'm using, and generally it's probably a 15 to 20 centimeter kahawai or a piper. I'll use a snap lock swivel and I'll just clip it on my line and send it out like a trapeze and let the current take it exactly where I want it. That's the basic principle of how I live bait. And then you're not annoying your mates, you're not watching a balloon or any of that sort of stuff. You're keeping a good eye on that, running a really light drag. When a kingy hits it, well, she's on. And then because it's pulling in the middle of the line, it's about breaking that sinker, rod down, wind, get that sinker, and as soon as it hits the clip comes back over the sinker, slides over the shaft, and sits out clear. So you're good to go. Weights on, fish on, away you go. It depends. It really does depend. If you're fishing an area where you're going to cast it and it's going to set and it's not going to be rolling and twisting, you'll get away without it. And sometimes it's best to be really, really simple and not complicate it. And because what you're trying to use is going to slide over it, you want minimal risk as possible. Really simple to go straight over the knot. You can even put a little bit of that Lumo stuff over it, or a bead to protect it. What's that, sorry? Yep. I'll just bring this one back up. So this is the Imp Lomcast rig. And what are you asking me? Yep. You've lost sinkers off it. Yep. So it's like anything. You've got genuine ones, which are breakaway IM2 improved imp clips. And it's quite a mouthful. They're from the UK, and they're roughly probably around about $18 for 10. And they should last you forever, unless you break your line. The flip side to that is there's some AliExpress ones that are floating around on the market, and they're half that price, and you lose your gear on it. You lose sinkers, and they can be labelled as a whole different lot of labels. I won't go into that, but if you look for the breakaway ones, they will not let you down. Yep, and it should have IMP2. So make sure it has that 2 on it, and then they're extra strength. And it's the same as the Genie clips. So you've got 2 different types of Genie clips. You've got your silver ones, which are standard, and then you've got your bronze ones, which are double the strength, and they never fail. They never let your swivels out. They're much better. Any other questions, guys? What's that? Sorry, mate? Do I sell pre-made traces? No, I don't. I'm happy to show anybody how to make them. They're really, really simple, and you can save lots of money by making them yourself. But no, I don't. I generally don't. Nah. I give them away if I make one. Yeah. What's that? Sorry, sir. So these skirts here are used commercially by longliners, and I mean they're out sea, they're making a living off catching fish, and they're really good at what they do. They're effective, and it's about time and making money. These are sold in packs of 10. It's exactly what the commercial guys use, and it's just one variation of a whole lot of skirts that you can use. But what makes these special is the heads of them are Lumo, and they're really, really durable. You can pull the living lights out of it. They catch a lot of good snapper, and these are the 2 colours that I would recommend. You can find them online, or if you come and see me afterwards, I'll show you a link where you can find them online. Really, really good. I think they might cost $8 for 10 or something like that, but they'll last and last and last until you break off or something like that. Yeah. Any other questions? Where can you get octopus? So I'm fortunate, I do lots of diving. So I'm always hustling to find an octopus, and I'll grab an octopus before I grab anything else. But where you can find them is when you jump online, they've got, I think, like Moana or one of those companies actually imports some Spanish ones, something like that. And they're actually not too bad. They look a little bit different to our New Zealand ones, but they're actually pretty good. Yep. And I think they're selling them roughly for around about $30 for a kilo of it, something like that. But it lasts for a very long time, and it's so good. Yep. Yeah. I'm pretty rough and ready, so I'm just in there. But this year in particular, there were some really big ones. And me and my young fellas, we've got a little bit of a competition amongst ourselves where we were always trying to outdo each other and get these big ones. And one of the ones I grabbed this year was about 13 kilos. And it had legs of doom on it, and I thought it was going to take me under the water. It had my mask, and I was fighting it, and the mate came over, and he said, "What's the commotion here?" He grabbed one side, and it pulled his mask off too. But the best thing that you can do if you are a little bit shy is either use like a little spear gun. The hardest thing to do is dispatching them. You know, you've got guys that you can bite them between the eyes. The other way is just a real precision mark straight between the eyes, just really quick, and then you'll see them change colour. Yep. If you learn how to do that really quick, you'll have no dramas. What was that, sorry? Oh, yep. I'll just tie that back on, and I'll just go through that demonstration so it's nice and clear. That's a really good question. excuse the knot because it's a knot over a knot, but you'll get the idea. So just going back to cover the purpose of this rig. The purpose of this rig is to basically get a bait as absolutely far as you can get it. And when I go back to some of the pictures of the 90 Mile and West Coast, even a lot of the East Coast beaches, everybody can cast 50 metres. Every single person who's fishing on the beach can cast 50 metres, no worries. But how many of them can cast 100 metres? How many of them can cast 150 metres? How many of them can get a bait that far? And that's the point of difference. You've got along a whole stretch of beach, all your mates there, and they're all plonking it right there, is having the ability to go right out the back, way beyond any of them. And it gives you a huge advantage when you're fishing. So the trace clips on the genie clip with a swivel, and the purpose of that system right there is so you can have half a dozen traces baited up. You can have some octopus baited up, some pilchards or whatever you like to use, some crayfish. And then what that does there is you bait it up, you slide your hook down. Now with the hook itself, it just clips on to the bottom of that. So you've got your bait sitting out, or your octopus or whatever you've got baited on there, you've always got a little bit of the barb showing. It just tucks in behind the barb. When it hits the water, this little paddle is designed to catch the water, and it actually throws the trace, so it pulls it right away. And now you've got it where it'll sit down current, right out of the way, it won't tangle, and it's, when you hook up, it pulls the sinker right away, and so now you're fighting the fish. So it's not like a ledger rig where you've got your trace right there with direct pressure and you're fighting your sinker and all that sort of jazz. It pulls it right out of the way. But when you cast it, say for example you're fishing and you usually cast a ledger rig out, when you cast your bait and sinkers doing this through the air, when you cast it out and it's stuck on this little clip, it's like casting a sinker without a bait. It's really smooth. It casts so aerodynamic, it's just amazing. And it adds a lot of distance onto your cast. Do you understand that? It'll detach. Yep. Yep. So when it detaches, there's usually one of two things. It's usually a specific crosswind that's coming in. It's usually like a specific type of crosswind, and that creates that marginal piece of slack line, and that pops it. Or the other thing is that the way that I bait all my traces, my beak hook or that hook is right at the point. So when I cast, it's not doing a helicopter, like my hook's not halfway back down the bait, because that's another reason why I see that happen. But there's another product that you can use, and it's called splashdown clips. They're red. And your hook sits in that and it cannot come out until impact. Those ones that can, I like those because they're simple, but those splashdown clips, there's no coming out of those. Yeah.
I've just thought of a question. When you're doing long casting, are you doing the traditional long cast like that, or I've seen a few YouTube clips where there's some sort of discus scenario?
Yeah. I'll try and break this down for you as best I can. So to get distance, you see old mate run from the top of the hill. He's charging at the wave and nearly falls over and tosses it. That's not the way. It's about creating as much arc as possible. So most guys who go out casting or go to throw a bait out, they probably start at about 2 o'clock and they're casting back towards 10. By the time the sinker takes up a hold and starts to create resistance, you're already probably at about 12:30. So for this much part of your cast, you're actually building pressure on the rod That's what's giving you distance. So you've got to think to yourself, how do I create more arc to create that resistance earlier so I can really get the most out of the rod? And that's where having the right rod to the individual is important, the right length and the right action. Because you don't want a rod that's too parabolic, because then it's going to absorb all of your energy that you're putting through it. And you don't want a rod that's too stiff that you can't bend, because if you can't bend it, you can't send it. Myself, when I'm trying to get distance, if I'm casting towards that Shimano thing, I'm literally probably facing about 90 degrees. And I'm starting right out here, and I'm bringing that rod right around and over and creating the biggest arc I possibly can. Yep. That's a really good question. But it's a lot of practice. Yeah. The other way to get around it is when you first start out casting, use a shorter drop. So maybe 200 mils from the rod tip. And then as you get better, slowly start to drop it, because that creates more resistance back, but work on building your arc. Hey guys. Is there any other questions, guys, or you had enough? Thanks, guys.